here on CBS Sports HQ, the Heisman talk continues, and 8 different players have been favorites or co-favorites to win the Heisman entering this season, and that's the most of any players since at least 2012. So it feels like eons ago, another lifetime, when we were talking about Arch Manning as the preseason Heisman favorite, and then we saw it all listed out here, how much has changed as we're going into week 12 of college football. Danny Kanell is here on set. Danny, we're going to go through your top 3, right? Which there is some differences. I was just talking with Lige earlier, very different mindsets. You have Fernando Mendoza as your number 1 guy. And I'm curious, is that final drive at Penn State, which led to arguably the greatest catch of the season,
right,
is that his Heisman moment, or is there still more to come that is contributing to him being your number 1?
So I think without question that was his Heisman moment to date. Now, I don't know if Indiana fans want to have that type of situation arise again. They would love to see what Fernando Mendoza's been doing throughout most of the season, which is completely dominate, like throw 4 or 5 touchdowns and have a 20 or a 30-point victory. But those are the types of moments that resonate with Heisman voters, because everybody at the end of the season is probably going to be around the same statistics. They're going to have a lot of touchdowns, high completion percentage, and be in the national championship race. So the more opportunities you have to do something like that on a national stage when your team needs you to go 80 yards with the boys, as Fernando Mendoza likes to say. And it wasn't just the final throw. There were several throws on that drive that were just big-time throws. And then, of course, the catch of the year from Omar Cooper. Those are the types of things that voters remember when they're trying to differentiate who's out there.
And obviously the whiteout, the Penn State environment is very, very intense, and it's on a national stage, to your point. But what do you have to say to the folks that are saying, you're Indiana, you never should have been in that situation in the first place, you know, going up against an opponent like Penn State, which is a very different team than we expected?
Right. I mean, I think that's more about Indiana's, resume, and if you were looking at how they should be ranked by the committee, how do they view that? But from a Heisman perspective, I saw a player who was getting hit all day long, and like, you're only one player on a team, and if your offensive line is struggling as much as Indiana's line was struggling in that moment, it's not really your fault. And so he didn't make the big turnover, because I do think, and it's interesting how things were unfolding during that game, because I bet if you watched Heisman odds through 3 quarters, Fernando Mendoza probably dropped to 4 or 5 in the race. But due to one drive, he's able to pull himself back to potentially the top candidate. In my say, that's where I have as number 1. But I do think that's what great players do. When the chips are against you, even no matter if you're supposed to be a favorite, when all the chips are against you and nobody thinks you have a chance and you do something like that, that to me shows the sign of a true winner.
Okay, so Fernando Mendoza is number 1. Number 2, you have Julian Sayin, who maybe isn't putting up the craziest stats, but he has a certain opportunity that I don't know that these other teams do, and going up against a rival like Michigan, where it is so volatile. And Ohio State has lost to Michigan for the past, 4 seasons?
Yeah.
So if he is able to get this win finally break that streak, what would that do for him? Would that potentially push him up?
For sure. Because what more can you do? Because they've been close to perfect all season long. That's why he hasn't had a Heisman moment, because he's usually out of the game in the 4th quarter. Like, he's sitting over on the bench while they're nursing a lead, and you don't want to risk him to injury. I think there's a couple things that really impressed me about Julian Sayin. One is the completion percentage, which is off the charts. We're going to see him challenge the all-time completion percentage, which was just set. Guys keep breaking this. Mac Jones and Bo Nix both at 77.4. Julian Sayin has an opportunity for that. But I do think he needs to have that game on a big stage, which no stage will be bigger, because, oh, by the way, this Michigan team is still very much in the playoff hunt. They only have 2 losses, and there's probably the more likelihood is that Michigan is 9-2 when they're facing Ohio State. It's in Ann Arbor, so it'll be on the road for Julian Sayin, and I think he'll have to rise to the occasion for that one. But even if he does put up massive numbers in that game and they win comfortably, there still is the opportunity versus my number 1 in Fernando Mendoza, which is ultimately really what I think it's going to boil down to. Personally, I think the Heisman Trophy is going to go to the winner of the Big Ten championship game and whoever outshines on that stage.
All right, and finally, Ty Simpson. He has a big opportunity this coming week. Is there anything that he can do in your eyes to make him your number 1 down the stretch?
Yeah, I mean, he's done everything he could to win the Heisman Trophy. It's just those other guys are having exceptional seasons, and he absolutely could. I mean, even if this weekend, if he beats Oklahoma and puts up big numbers, which I do expect him to do, then I think he'll be there, right in the mix. And if he beats Auburn in a rivalry game, which I think he will, to me it comes down to the SEC championship. Now, I think the favorite's going to come from the Big Ten because it's probably 1 versus 2. But Bama could have 4 versus 3 in a game against an undefeated Texas A&M game, which if he beats them, then it's going to be one of the tightest Heisman Trophy races we've seen because it's going to be really hard to pry the thing away from Ty Simpson. He's got multiple Heisman moments and Heisman-type games. Think about going on the road to Georgia in Athens and having a big game there. The one thing he's got going against him, but it's so far in the rear view, is the game against Florida State was not his best, but it's so far in week 1, nobody even remembers it. But he's still very much alive.
Yeah, and Chip Patterson, we've had conversations about Heisman voters maybe respecting the fact that he's been there and stayed there and waited for his turn, which is something that's kind of an anomaly this day and age in college football. Danny, we appreciate it going through your top 3 Heisman Trophy candidates, and as we already discussed, it changes very frequently, so we'll see what happens down the stretch. You can hear Danny Kanell on the Cover 3 podcast with the guys. You can download, follow, listen, all the things wherever you find your favorite podcasts.